I don't usually work on videos like this, but after seeing some things and mulling it over a bit more, I think I'm more comfortable making this video. A video dropped recently called The Boondocks Doesn't Care About Black People. It was made by Jawn Louis, and it's actually a really good critique of the Boondocks show, its classism, misogynoir, and issues within the show. It's been really cool to see this increased criticism to a show that, for a time, many people painted as infallible. The idea that we can now critique the Boondocks has me really excited because I want to see a show better than the Boondocks. A show do what the Boondocks has done more effectively. But there were some points during this video where I found myself going, man, let's start with a disclaimer. Every YouTuber says this, I mean no hate, and then like they spend a whole hour just crapping on someone's their video. I don't really want to do that. And there's a few reasons for that. One of them being, Jawn responded to my feedback quite sincerely. I even listened to some of his thoughts on FD's podcast, which I recommend you check out. They even shouted me out. Like, I really don't, he makes some really good work. Like, there are so many critiques in this video that are so on point, like the classism and such. Like, I really recommend this video. But there are a number of things that made me a little uncomfortable. And I think it was after seeing this comment that I was like, okay, I'll talk about it. And what's interesting is, like, in isolation, this point isn't even that, like, egregious. It's not even a big deal. In some ways, I kind of agree with it. But it's in the wider context of the video that this point kind of makes me uncomfortable.
I don't consider myself part of ADOS or FBA movement. I agree with some things that they say. Black people in America who don't have ties to chattel slavery in this country are habitual line steppers, sometimes. It's not a coincidence King Bach blew up performing digital minstrel acts about Black Americans, because he is not a Black American. Fresh and Fit feel comfortable disrespecting Black women because they don't have ties to this country. DJ Academics, who's Jamaican, blew up treating Black residents of Chicago like zoo animals. Would Math Hoffa have allowed Fat Joe to disrespect Black Americans in the FBA movement if Math was ADOS descent instead of Caribbean?
So I actually want to start there because there's an element of this video that talks down to a subset of people, a people that are perpetually online and performative. I'm going to tackle this first thing first. How can you, as a Black British person, talk about the Boondocks? What possible value can you add to the conversation about this show?
Why the man always talking? I come with a thingy and make them zip it. Wrap up where don't make me feel it. See whole pies and nine, sandwich bags spend an hour zipping. Cowboy spinning a ding, I see no one spend an hour with it.
The Boondocks, and by extension Aaron, were my hyperfixations for a period of time. In many ways, it still is. A lot of my videos include a ton of citations from Aaron Ruguda's interviews, people from the show, and just the conversations going on at the time. If you actually watch my content, I never go, in Atlanta, it's like this. We all know in Chicago this happens. Like, I don't know. And I don't pretend to know. A lot of my engagement with the Boondocks is media related, primarily because the Boondocks draws a lot of its ideas and influence from the media. I've never viewed the Boondocks, or any Black media for that matter, as a substitute for understanding real Black people. I'd like to think many of my critiques speak to that. My problem is people look at that and say, well, you're British, so we don't want to hear it. Not Black British, by the way, it's just British. It's always reducing me to that. It doesn't matter if the entire video is basically just me reading interviews and comparing and contrasting that to the show. If you hear my accent, it must mean I'm just profiteering off the Black American struggle. It can never be an appreciation or reverence for Black people across the globe. No. It must be that I'm just another hustler, trying to co-opt what Black America has built for themselves. I'll tell you something about Blackness in the UK. There is division. We have Nigerians and Jamaicans making all kinds of assumptions about each other. We have tribal division derivative of our home countries. Lots of Yoruba and Igbo people don't like each other. And we deal with white people co-opting our culture into this everyday London slang all the time. A white man will say "wagwan" to you with a straight face, with no repercussions. But there is a real appreciation and love of Black music and art. And there's no cultural barrier for that. We love back home. At Carnival, there's so much love for all kinds of Black music now. And while there's a conversation to be had there, there's been this real sense of solidarity in young people when it comes to Black art. So I'll admit, I'm always a little taken aback by this hostility towards other Black people in the diaspora for engaging with Black art. Because at least to me, we're all Black people here. And I'm no fool. There are a lot of contextual, understandable reasons for Black Americans to be very protective of their art, culture, and the perspectives had on it. I just worry about this fixation on being American. To me, to own your blackness and be proud of it is to show that solidarity, is to engage with and embrace all kinds of different perspectives because you just have so much love for just black people. And I always feel like there's something very deeply American, just as there is something very fundamentally British about obsessing over that division and not being reciprocal to different perspectives as a result of that. Going back to the Boondocks, not to toot my own horn here, I come to my videos with so much information that nobody really talks about. I discovered the original Boondocks hit this website. I went out and interviewed several people from this show to ensure I got their perspectives correct for a documentary project. I found Aaron's old account on the OKPlayer website, discovered some things that he was struggling with at the time, and how it got turned into an episode of the show. And I've read every single comic strip several times. Why? Because I'm passionate about this franchise. And not in this infallible way where it's like, oh yeah, let's hype up Aaron, but more in just documenting why it is the way it is and the history involved in that. It's one of the most influential Black animated cartoons ever. When I die and this channel hopefully outlives me, what people will remember, among other things I hope, is how passionate I was about the Boondocks. And when I see people reduce all of that passion for this Black art to, well, you're British, so shoo, it's really disheartening because it tells me people don't care about new information or discovering more about the series. It's about positioning yourself as an authority on blackness and disregarding other perspectives, ironically, not on the premise of your blackness, but your American identity. And like I said earlier, there's nothing Black about a lack of solidarity, but there is something very American about that framing. Now, with that said, if I could explain my critique of this video in a sentence, is that a lot of its sentiments undermine the point it's trying to make. A big part of this video is how the Boondocks frames its politics from the lens of middle-class white people. Now that's actually something I agree with. I made a video about it very recently, but then it constantly calls back to other white shows and says, well, in this white show, it's done better, which I think really undermines the point because it's setting white media up as the standard to attain. Like, respectfully, South Park doesn't have what I'd call nuanced political satire. It's very reactionary. That's why the turnaround time is so quick. I think every episode is made in maybe 1 or 2 weeks. It's very callous and careless in how it tackles many issues, and it's a massive reason why so many conservative white people fell in love with it. It just doesn't care. So using that as a framing device to talk about why the Boondocks doesn't care about Black people almost feels comedic. This show, South Park has one prominent Black character, and his name is Token. And I actually like The Simpsons, for instance, but it's also just another white show. It doesn't have to think about that racial dynamic or element as much. It's not engaging with that, compared to the Boondocks, which explicitly from its conception was about where race intersects. It's about the Black experience, Black people, and what it believes are Black issues. And while there is a lot to critique there, it's uncomparable to a white show that doesn't have to think about that. It's unfair to compare Black creative works about race to white contemporaries that don't have to think about it because they are beneficiaries of white supremacy and a normalized white media. Critiquing the Boondocks for looking at things from a white lens while doing it in your own video undermines the core point you're trying to make. By your own logic, you don't care about Black people. I'm not trying to imply that because I don't think that's true. The same way I don't think the title of this video is true. I'm gonna prefix, the title of this video has changed since I began making this video, so I just wanted to let that be known clear. It's still kind of a big overarching part of the video, but the title has been changed and I'm very appreciative of that because yeah, now I don't have to include, okay. The criticism from Blacks I take very seriously, no matter how off the wall it is, Muguda says. It's not that I don't believe stereotypes are out there, but I believe a healthy Black person, a truly healthy Black person, has a complete and total disregard for what white people think And that's when you've achieved equality. It's not my job to break down the white community's stereotypes. This is from a CBS interview from 1999, back when the Boondocks was first launching. This perspective from Aaron is actually fairly consistent. If you've been watching the videos and keeping track, he's always been saying that it's important for black people to not care about what white people think. He says it here, 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 and literally in a recent statement within Charlemagne's book. I say this to say that despite me feeling like and agreeing the Boondocks does adhere to respectability politics, I think it's important to have the nuance to go, this clearly isn't the intention, and it's not a statement inherently on the creator. Make no mistake, there's a lot that can be said about Aaron, given how much of his black identity he finds is derivative of a specific era of hip-hop and how that informs his perspective on mainstream media and ultimately the black community at large. But I think it's unfair to assess that the Boondocks doesn't care about black people. And maybe this is just a clickbait title to draw in views, and it worked, but it's also not the full story. This same speech that I think more and more of us are becoming more critical of is also communicating a point about strategy. It's about how you need to understand how to reach people to get a point across. The Boondocks is a product of an era that believes this is the most effective way to reach black people. And there's something gross about that, and the white media for propping up the Boondocks as a result. But again, painting black media that was explicitly created because of how much it revered the contributions of black history, black art, and hip-hop as uncaring of black people is such a broad and presumptuous stroke. And speaking personally, disincentivizes black artists from creating political media from their hearts out of fear that they'll misrepresent themselves. I made a video years ago called Black Escapism where I spoke kind of to this, that there was this growing disdain for overtly black political media. And the idea of needing more escapism from that inherently political framework is really just a desire to be in proximity with the white media. And this video, ironically, speaks to that.
But in this chapter, we're going to try and answer one question. Does all black art have to be political? I'm sure some smart ass like, well, actually all art is political. Shut up, nerd. You know what I mean.
Which is especially sad because there's a lot of citations that show that Aaron was not only deeply insecure about his own work, but his own identity. It's why despite those criticisms, and I do think they're valid, I think it's unfair to categorize him and his work like this. There's a real point made to kind of put down Aaron in his relationship with blackness, and I don't think that's a healthy or constructive way at approaching media criticism or black art.
The Boondocks is not South Park. It's not like they could turn around episodes in a few days. Also, it should be clear, but the creators do not with black people like that. They're closer to Uncle Ruckus politics. Like, I slept on it if I even was going to include this, but look at this Aaron Magruder. Listen to the way he talks about black people in speeches. Does it surprise you he married an Asian woman? Does that sound like a man that respects black women or loves modern black culture? I wasn't going to bring it up, but that smirk as he talks in that C-SPAN clip, it just kept annoying me. Then his haircut and the lineup. I said, I bet he doesn't have a black wife. It took some digging, but I found a rare photo of him and his wife. She's Asian, of course.
There's a whole point where he brings up that Aaron has an Asian wife, and I'm sitting here going, one, that wasn't a secret, and two, it's not relevant to the point you're making. It's this gossipy approach that makes it very difficult to digest this point. Is this about how the Boondocks explores blackness and presents black people? Or is it a blast on the creator? I'm going to tell you guys a little story, one I've never told on this channel before. Years back when I was working on the Boondocks documentary, I got in contact with a writer on season 4. I'm not going to say their name, but you can probably guess who it is. And she opened up to me about what happened, about how Aaron demanded to have his name taken off the show, that after the show aired, she was spammed with hate messages, that during this time her mother died and no one was really there for her. It made me so angry. But still yet, there's a way to approach that. And while working on it, something I told a lot of people while discussing it is that I didn't want to make a blast on Aaron Magruder because it would take away from the point. That context is everything, and season 4's flaws do not exist in isolation. Just as her situation was terrible, especially given their history, Aaron also had good reason for not wanting white executives to profit off his name when he wasn't on the show anymore. The point of this story being, you need to be delicate when talking about these things when you have a platform, because we don't always know the full picture.
And what distancing oneself from the black community does to those type of people. If you've watched my videos in the past, I've spoken about it on this very website. In the Cornbread Tube video essay community niche itself, is an air of superiority and a feeling of, we will speak for you low-class Negroes. They've attended the universities, read the books, and now they are qualified to speak on black issues affecting black people they themselves call problematic and would avoid in public places. You notice I've never broken bread with certain channels in the niche, and others have distanced themselves, yet they are all qualified to speak on the opinions and thoughts of the very working class black people they avoid. How many of these people are actually willing to touch grass and go outside and hang around the very black people they can critique from the comfort of their homes and group of black academia? Ask yourself, why hasn't any of these ones asked the question, why do black people feel the black bourgeoisie have an air of elitism?
So you be just lying and shit, huh?
This shadowy, pretentious online figure that's so up there on us that they'll say that all art is political. These perpetually online black activists that aren't in tune with the real world, yeah. I'm going to tell you guys about a YouTuber that I found last year that makes incredible videos that are unbelievably well researched. Black Alt Media. Believe it or not, they actually have a video on the Boondocks. And I learned so much from them with their resources provided and their understanding of saneism and ableism, something I wasn't even really privy to. And one of the most ableist things to say in this online space is the idea of armchair activism. The people who spend time talking or hyperfixating or making videos with a bunch of citations and reading lists are really just performative nerds. But the truth is, due to disability, for some, that's all they can do. Some people are genuinely bedridden and all they can do is speak to these issues online. Are they lazy? Is their perspective not important? There's this perverse idea online that people speaking honestly about these issues must really just be disingenuous losers. They're performative, they don't really care, and it's almost always projection. We can't fathom a world where people care this much about these issues, or the fact that some people feel liberated by the online medium to express themselves, so they all must be lying nerds. Ironically, it reminds me quite a bit of an episode of the Boondocks I don't really like, The S Word, an episode that communicates that all black people are really just lying when they say they don't like to hear the N-word, because within its own universe, it cannot imagine anybody caring that much about the usage of the word. I bring up this comparison because the sentiments expressed in this video feel quite similar. I'm going to tell you guys something again, from the heart, and maybe someone will relate to it. Part of why I talk about these things online so much isn't because I have an interest in playing this kind of performative social media man. It's actually quite the opposite. This is one of the only spaces where I feel fully comfortable just being myself and saying how I feel. This feeling is the same for many marginalized groups, and sadly, even conservative white people. This conflation of the idea that if it's online, then it must not be real is a right-wing trick that I see so many people on the political left fall for. Not to say that there aren't grifters out there trying to gain notoriety, but it's actually a lot more likely that people you meet in real life are putting on masks, and online, where they're anonymous, they're more likely to express how they really feel. And looking down on that discussion by virtue of being online, and therefore not being, massive air quotes here, real, isn't just ableism, but is a really dismissive way at looking at online discourse. I'm going to give another example, one that maybe people will find more relatable, or maybe not, I don't know, I don't want to annoy this guy. FD signifier. I don't think he has any idea how many times someone has asked me, so what do you think of FD? I'm not in like the sincere way, more in like the, I'm gonna tell you why I don't like him way. Like, you ever have someone ask you a question, but you know it kind of comes with an opinion? It's like, this not once, not twice, not 3 times, not 4 times, not even 5 times. All black people, all different people. And it's usually something to do with money. And I say the same thing every time. You know FD has a family, right? He's not like this uni student. He's 40 plus with a wife and children. His obligations are not my own. I don't understand what it's like to live that life. I can barely take care of myself. I had to ask for mutual aid recently. Trust me, I cannot imagine what it's like trying to balance taking care of a family while doing this YouTube stuff. I say this to echo a point of Aaron's, that perception isn't everything. I know firsthand what it's like to get comments going, you're getting a YouTube bag, innit? Road to 100K, bro. And be in overdraft and debt and be like, you have no idea. You have no idea. Literally, I did a food bank initiative for like quite a while, and I keep trying to do it, right? But it was expensive. I was paying for the front cover poster. I was paying for people to do work and artwork and coloring books in between. It was expensive. It was time consuming. And eventually I didn't have the means to do it anymore. I know what it's like to fail. It's not easy, right? Especially when you're poor. I don't know who these elusive online leftists are, but they're probably working class. They're probably struggling just like the rest of us. And the use of academia or citations, again, because I don't know who this is, because it's so non-specific, doesn't say anything about their proximity to Black people, and is requiring of a lot of assumptions and mental gymnastics to reach that conclusion. The purpose of this video isn't to disparage or look down on Jawn's video. It's got a lot of solid critiques of this series that I wish more people brought up. It's also got Dr. Jared Ball on it, and I'm not gonna lie, the videos are really kind of bumped up on that premise. There's a really, like, honestly, some great stuff, great insights, and some really interesting perspectives. I don't agree with all of it, but like, yeah, like, it's some interesting stuff. But these elements were so distracting to me that I felt like it took away from what was ultimately a really interesting critique of the Boondocks. I'll leave you with this one quote from Aaron. To be an artist that throws your crappy, rushed workout on a deadline 7 times a week in front of 30 million people, then has to go on TV in front of 1,000 college kids and be an expert on everything from interracial relationships to Black Marxism, you gotta go out thinking you're the shit or you fold. Because I know how little fun I have, because I know how hard life is under a perpetual deadline, it's difficult for me to imagine anyone thinking I'm living it up. Because I know how unhappy I am with my own work, it's hard for me to imagine anyone thinking I have a big head. Aaron's always been deeply insecure about his work and, by extension, his Black identity. This is something I do relate to, as someone who works tirelessly on a project, having no idea whether or not it will succeed or do well. A project that is both overtly about a Black experience, but very clearly political. The anxiety of what comes next, the fear of getting something wrong. My true fear is not that I will be critiqued in the same way. It's that this kind of criticism will stunt the next great Black artist with their heart in the right place, but the fear to create what sincerely comes from their heart. Because in the eyes of some, they don't care about Black people.